Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. Alright everyone, welcome to episode 96 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
Political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Entire Tohoku bullet train line back in service a month after quake.
Yen slips to fresh 20-year low of around 126.55 to the US dollar.
Japanese bird researcher first in the world to prove that birds use words and grammar.
This week in Japan. Alright, so our first story. Entire Tohoku bullet train line back in service a month after quake.
Kyodo News has reported that on April 14th, the East Japan Railway Company resumed services on the entire Tohoku Shinkansen bullet train line for the first time since a powerful earthquake hit the country's northeastern region in mid-March.
Services were disrupted when a Tohoku Shinkansen bullet train traveling between Tokyo and Sendai, the capital of Miyagi Prefecture, derailed following the magnitude 7.4 quake on March 16th, with track infrastructure also damaged.
The high-speed trains have now resumed operating between Fukushima and Sendai stations, the only stretch of the line on which operations were still suspended, and passengers are now able to travel direct from Tokyo to Aomori, the capital of the northernmost prefecture of Japan's main island.
The resumption also enabled Hokkaido and Akita Shinkansen trains to reach Tokyo.
So it's back fully online. Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, it sure was.
However, JR East said that efforts to restore infrastructure are still underway and that its bullet trains will operate at a reduced speed and are on temporary timetables for the moment.
The resumption of services on the entire line came earlier than the initially planned date of late April because there were no major aftershocks, which expedited repair work.
The Tohoku Shinkansen bullet train derailed in Shiroishi city of Miyagi Prefecture, causing suspension of services in areas stretching from Tochigi Prefecture to Iwate. JR East has gradually restored its services in the affected areas since then.
Damage to trains and infrastructure such as railway tracks was estimated to reach 15 to 20 billion yen, with the company also expecting a hit to its revenue of 12 billion yen from lost sales.
The suspension was the longest since the magnitude 9 earthquake that hit the northeastern region on March 11, 2011. At that time, it took about a month and a half for the company to resume operations on the entire line.
16 of the train's 17 cars derailed in the incident last month. 6 of the 78 people aboard were injured, marking the first time passengers were hurt in a Shinkansen derailment.
Tohoku Shinkansen trains will run at reduced speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour, half their normal maximum speed between Koriyama Station in Fukushima and Ichinoseki Station in Iwate, with the number of trains reduced to 80 to 90% of normal operations.
Under the curbed operations, it will take about 30 minutes longer to travel from Tokyo to Sendai, the capital of Miyagi, and about 1 hour longer from Tokyo to Morioka, the capital of Iwate.
That is a big difference.
For sure, for sure.
That's like probably 30% longer than usual.
Especially for Japan because, you know, they're so on it all the time. So a change like this is probably quite upsetting for some.
Honestly, yeah, with an hour longer from Tokyo to Morioka, it's almost just as fast to drive.
Ah, yeah, good point.
If you don't drive the speed limit, of course, which nobody does.
It's a really good drive up there too, right?
It's pretty nice. It's
Yeah.
long, but it's a straight shot. I mean, due north.
Yeah.
Keep going north. Keep going north. 2 hours later. Keep going north. That's basically how it goes. So timetables are expected to return to normal after the Golden Week holidays in early May.
So, talking about this earthquake that happened on March 16th, that was really something else. Definitely freaked me out quite a lot. How did that compare to 3/11?
Oh, it was night and day. I mean, that earthquake that we had last month was like, oh shit, this might get bad. On March 11th, it was, I thought I was going to die.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Big difference, right?
Yeah. No. I think the whole, this one also, the whole time I was just waiting for it to possibly get worse. The thing that freaked me out about this one on March 16th is just how long it shook for,
Exactly. And when you're in an earthquake, it's always that question of, is it going to, go away or is it going to intensify?
Right.
And so in the middle of an earthquake, you're busy like freaking out and not thinking about like, what do I do if it gets worse? So I don't think anyone's really prepared for an earthquake. It's like one of those, impossible to prepare for situations.
For sure.
And so like the common Japanese knowledge is like, get under a table or a desk or, go into a bathroom or somewhere with a window or...
The March 16th earthquake, though, was the first time... I live next to a bunch of tower mansions, and any building that had 10 stories or higher, everyone was leaving. I saw a bunch of flashlights with people running down the stairs. So I think...
Definitely. And so what ends up happening is when you're in a tall building like that, they're built to shake.
Right.
And so like, even if the earthquake isn't that bad, it shakes really, really, really long.
And violently the higher you're up. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so after the 2011 disaster, a lot of people moved out of the higher floors of those tower mansions, even though the buildings were safe, theoretically, because it was just so damn scary. Even during the aftershocks, the shaking and the shaking and the shaking, it's just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Give me something on the 4th floor. That's what I did. I was on the 7th floor of a 7-story tall building when the earthquake hit. I wasn't there at the time, but even the aftershocks were just mercilessly anxiety inducing.
Damn.
And so I was like, I gotta get out of here. And so I moved to a low rise and moved to a building on the 4th floor of a 5-story tall building that was long and wide. Didn't shake nearly as bad.
That's good.
It was, hindsight is 2020, but it didn't make any much of a difference because there weren't any big earthquakes after then. And I've since moved again, but, at the time, I was like, I just have to get out of this building. This is driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Did wonders for the alcohol business, though.
I did hear something about that.
It was true.
All right, in our next story, yen slips to fresh 20-year low of around 126.55 to the US dollar.
Kyodo News has also reported that the Japanese yen slipped to a 20-year low in the mid-126 level against the US dollar on the morning of April 15th, amid the prospect of a widening monetary policy gap between the Bank of Japan and the US Federal Reserve.
The yen sank to its weakest level since May 2002, following an overnight rise in US Treasury yields.
Yuji Saito, head of foreign exchange at Credit Agricole Corporate and Investment Bank in Tokyo, said, quote, "Currency movements were volatile due to subdued trading, with many participants taking time off ahead of Easter."
So the yen has been weakening rapidly versus the dollar recently, as market participants have unloaded the Japanese currency amid the prospect of widening interest rate differentials between the United States and Japan.
The United States Federal Reserve has started tightening its monetary grip to curb rising inflation, while the Bank of Japan has maintained powerful monetary easing.
While a weaker yen boosts exporters' profits earned overseas when repatriated, it also slows Japan's economic growth, with higher imported energy and food prices, which threatens the prospects for Japanese consumer spending.
Japan's finance minister Shunichi Suzuki said that depreciation of the yen could be viewed as bad in a situation where material prices have not been fully passed on.
But Credit Agricole Saito said the minister's comments had little impact on currency movements on April 15th, and it is possible the dollar could surpass the 130 yen line before the U.S. Federal Reserve holds its policy meetings next month.
Yeah, so the yen, it's weak as hell.
Yeah, it's pissing me off. Obviously, Americans living in Japan, right? It's not so. It's a bit anxiety-inducing to see.
Yeah, it's like especially for those of us thinking about, when's the next time I'm gonna go on vacation to America? For me, it's looking more and more like, see you next year.
Yeah, I mean, the yen used to be pegged to the dollar, right? I think we talked about this on the show before.
Yeah, back in the 80s, and then there was the Plaza Accord in, I think, 1987, and then they stopped doing that, and then, of course, it's been sort of back and forth ever since. And, it's really hard to track it. I mean, Rocky Swift, who was recently on our program, who watches these fluctuations as a market reporter, said that, it's really hard to see where the currency is going because, traders react to different developments in real time. And so whether there's an earthquake or a new policy decision, these traders are, at their desks, banging on their computers, yelling across the room, doing massive amounts of cocaine and, all the other things that traders do. We know this through, of course, movies.
Yeah.
Which is how you learn about these things.
So, right now at the time of recording, it's Easter weekend, right, in the West. So not a whole lot of movement right now. But I want to see the Japanese government step in. I mean, actually now, I was thinking if it gets to the 120 mark, that's when they need to kind of come in and, do something to stabilize it.
Well, it's over the 120 mark now, so hey guys, time to get that yen a little bit stronger.
Please, step in, do something.
And so, it's said that the Japanese government wants to see an exchange rate of about 105 yen to the US dollar.
Right.
And so anything below or above that is varying levels of not good.
Yeah.
The further away it is, the more not good it is. And so if it goes to 130, it's like 25 yen, not good.
Yeah. We were at the 105 or close to that mark, I think in January, was it? If it goes back to that, man, I'm putting a bunch of yen in US dollars because this is freaking me out. But the US market too is nuts right now. Like the housing market, it's like the bubble is like so freaking big.
And I wonder what's going to happen if the, U.S. housing bubble busts or if something happens elsewhere in the world, and another crazy country leader decides to invade another country. I mean, all of these things have some sort of impact on exchange rates.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, of course, the yen is seen as a safe haven currency, but I mean, these are pretty uncertain times, and the safe haven is being abandoned. So I guess that means everybody thinks that everything's okay in the world. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, well, let's hope that, investors do come back to the yen as the safe haven currency and safe haven asset to, put their money in. The banks here, keep low interest rates. So if any investors are listening, please help out the yen.
Buy some yen.
Yeah.
There's a sale going on.
There is a sale.
We slashed the prices just for you.
Everything's on sale.
Everything's on sale.
$6.99's now $2.99.
$9.99's now $0.99. And up next, Japanese bird researcher first in the world to prove that birds use words and grammar.
The Mainichi has reported that a Japanese researcher studying a bird common to the country's forests and urban parks has proven for the first time that birds communicate using words and grammar.
Toshitaka Suzuki, a 38-year-old assistant professor at Kyoto University's Hakubi Center for Advanced Research, first became interested in Japanese tits, which is a type of bird, just FYI, which are each about 15 centimeters long, when he was a second-year student at the Faculty of Science at Toho University. In a forest in Karuizawa of Nagano Prefecture, one tit suddenly let out a distinctive hee-hee call, and its entire flock took off. This was immediately followed by the appearance of a hawk, the tit's natural enemy, in the sky above.
Convinced that the tits were using different calls, Suzuki began experiments. Since then, he has used the forest as his laboratory, spending 6 to 8 months a year there for 16 years in total.
So the first thing that Suzuki worked on was proving that the tits had words, as we would understand the term. He experimented with the idea that the jar jar call that tits emitted when a snake appeared literally meant snake. A taxidermy snake was placed above a nest box for observation, and he confirmed that tits indeed made jar jar sounds. The tit did not make the same sound with other taxidermy predators such as hawks.
Next, he played a recorded jar jar call through a speaker, and the bird looked under the nest box and on the ground as if searching for snakes. However, this alone did not prove jar jar was a word. The bird, as Suzuki said, quote, may have just had a reflexive tendency to look down.
Then Suzuki came up with another experiment. A stick with a string attached was hung above the trunk of a tree, and a jar jar sound was played through a speaker while the stick was pulled up like a snake climbing the trunk. In most cases, the tits approached the stick when the jar jar sound was played and appeared to check it. With other calls, this behavior was almost never observed. Therefore, he reasoned that when they heard jar jar, the tits assumed a snake was nearby and mistook the snake for the reptile.
The results were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America in 2018. It was the first instance that an animal had been shown to use words.
So Suzuki has also researched, quote, bird grammar. His focus was on the P to P, or be alert, or G, or gather around sounds made by tits when chasing off their natural enemies. When they hear this, the tits gather around their natural enemies and threaten them, while keeping an eye on their surroundings.
However, the tits did not look alert or gather when the word order was swapped to GGG, Pete Spee. In other words, he thought it was possible that they recognized the meaning by word order or grammar.
There have been numerous reports of animals possibly having language, but it had never been proven scientifically until Suzuki's discovery.
Suzuki said regarding this, quote, research on animal language has not progressed well because of the assumption that humans are absolutely different from other animals. I hope that my method will be used as a reference for further research on other animals.
Suzuki's future goal is to create a field he dubs, quote, animal linguistics, to deepen people's understanding of animal communication.
So Parker, growing up as a musician and studying music and a number of different capacities, I came across people who notate on sheet music the bird calls that they hear. And it's extraordinarily complex to take like a bird call and get it right like in sheet music transcription form. But I remember being very young and my dad showing me like scientists have been doing this for a very long time, like since like Darwin. Actually, I think that was some of the first, transcriptions. Like they use the Western style sheet music and they write out like the notes that the bird is hitting and the different rhythmic patterns. And as soon as I saw that and the repetitiveness of a lot of them, I'm like, man, these guys, these are words, They're very, because the people who, you have to have an amazing set of ears and like a doctorate level amount of musical education to actually listen to a bird sound and transcribe it. It's insane what's required for that. And there's so much repetition. It's like they're saying the same word over and over again. So it doesn't surprise me too much. I think this is a really cool development.
Birds. They use words.
When I was in Hokkaido with 2 other friends, 3 of us were walking down this very long path to get to this like museum in the middle of a forest. And about every 90 meters, there was a light pole and there was a crow on each light pole. And every time we passed one of the light poles, they go, caw, 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 3 times, right? And they kept doing it 3 times. And then the other ones would echo 3, right? And it was 3 of us walking down. And I'm like, dude, are they counting us? And letting other people know like how many are coming. And so we got to the museum and then just me and one of the other guys were just walking around. We walked past one of the other ones and caw, caw, twice. So I'm like, they're counting us. And then I tested it and walked myself and only cawed once. And every time one of them would caw, it was like you could hear the other ones like 90, 180, like, it kept going farther and farther away. They were repeating it. Like they were all communicating how many people were walking around. And I'm sure they have words for food, like, oh, 3 people, the group of 3 has food, like simple stuff like that.
So it's not counting crows. The crows are counting us.
Counting crows. It was counting crows. Yeah. I find this to be really fascinating. I don't know. I think there's a lot of communication that goes on amongst animals. I mean, listen to whale calls, for example. I mean, it sounds like crazy analog synthesizers.
What does a whale call sound like?
That's my best impersonation of a whale call. There was a Star Trek movie dedicated to whale calls.
Star Trek, the whale generation.
Yeah, you didn't grow up watching all the nerdy sci-fi stuff that I did, but actually, this people listening that know Star Trek, they know this movie. This is a good fucking movie. You're giving me the most blank face.
I just want to credit, whoever named that Japanese bird with that very ironic name that we will not repeat out of context for protection of the innocent.
Yeah, I think it's just, the word used to have many different meanings. Japanese has a tendency to do that. They'll like pick like the Latin root, or something like that. And then in English, it ends up being a very derogatory word.
As usual, Americans ruin everything.
All right, and coming up next on Let's Talk About Creative Stuff Time, we're going to be talking about Japan's vinyl record production hitting the groove amid the pandemic, and a resurgence in the city pop genre that was popular in the 1980s. You're now listening to Tokyo Wave.
So the Mainichi recently reported on how the popularity of vinyl records has been picking up globally amid the pandemic, and sales in the United States have passed those of CDs since 2020. In Japan, too, production output by value in 2021 was 11.6 times higher than it was a decade earlier.
So what is happening in the analog record market, which fell into a slump years ago? Soki Takeuchi, the 31-year-old manager at a record store, doubling as a bar in Fukuoka's Chuo Ward in southwestern Japan, told the Mainichi Shimbun, about 70% of our customers are aged between 10 and 29. We may be seeing a reactionary backlash from them having been surrounded by digital technology since they were born.
Don't know what to say about 10-year-olds hanging out in a bar, but all right, cool. So Takeuchi started his record store called Living Stereo in Fukuoka in 2017 and added a bar space equipped with a high-end audio system when he relocated his business to its current location in November 2021. There, customers can enjoy selecting vinyl records and drinking.
Regular customer Shiho Kuramitsu, a 23-year-old university student, began to buy more records in 2020 when she started spending more time at home amid the spread of the coronavirus infections. She said of her fascination with vinyl, "Though I also use streaming services, it feels like records have more depth in the sound. It gives me a sense of enrichment when I brew coffee while playing records on my days off."
That sounds like a very hipster-friendly thing to do.
I'd have to agree with her 100% though.
Yeah, definitely. Vinyl is the shit. Bar none. So, according to the Recording Industry Association of Japan, which is not as widely hated as its American counterpart, the value of annual vinyl production peaked in 1980 at about 181.2 billion yen, which is about 1.5 billion US dollars. However, as analog records began to gradually be replaced with CDs, production declined to some 170 million yen, only 1.4 million USD in 2010.
However, the figure turned upward again in 2014. It remained almost unchanged in 2020 when the COVID crisis struck from the previous year. Then, in 2021, production volume jumped to some 1.91 million records, about 1.7 times the previous year's figure, and the highest in the past 10 years. Production value also rose to 3.9 billion yen, that's about $32 million, roughly 1.8 times the figure in the previous year. The figures are thought to have been partly boosted by stay-at-home demand amid the pandemic.
I know I've been buying lots of records in my extended free time, not spending out drinking, Records are awesome.
You have, and I've been buying records from you that you buy. It's a
virtuous cycle of consumption.
It is.
So the global revival of vinyl records is believed to have been triggered by the Record Store Day event first held in April 2008 in San Francisco by U.S. record store owners. They organized the event in a bid to revitalize independent record stores that had suffered a blow due to the digitization of music. They sold limited numbers of analog records by artists who cooperated in the event.
Though only about 10 vinyl titles were sold in the inaugural year, works by big names such as Bob Dylan were added from the second year onward, boosting the number of works and event locations. In 2020, the Record Store Day event was held in 23 countries, including Japan, spurring renewed recognition of the appeal of records.
Which is great because records are awesome. So in the United States, record sales climbed to $644 million in 2020, up some 30% from the previous year, topping CD sales for the first time in 34 years. In 2021, the number of records sold also grew 1.5 times from the previous year to 41.7 million records, surpassing the number of CDs again.
So we're already at $500 million a year industry, potentially $1 billion a year industry. Probably.
Records! Yeah. They're awesome! I gotta tell you again, they're friggin' awesome! Records!
So Lawson Entertainment, which operates major music store chain HMV in Japan, was quick to notice the vinyl record revival in the US and opened a record store in Tokyo's Shibuya district in 2014, which was rare at the time. Since then, it has released more than 100 works on vinyl annually, including past masterpieces and newly recorded titles. And I used to go to that store all the time. I love that store.
Now, I want to go to that store.
If you go to that store, you're going to hear the most badass city pop / 70s, 1980s Japanese funk, and you're going to buy way too many records. Like, oh my God.
Now I'm not sure if I want to go to that store anymore because I have a habit of impulse buying records.
Also, if you think your record player is good, they have like $10,000 record players set up with like preamps everywhere that you can like test the records on. And it's like frustrating how good it sounds.
Ouch. Yeah, I already have a pretty healthy audio equipment habit, so maybe I should stay away from that HMV. It sounds dangerous.
It's good, man. It's good. Yeah.
So this store's first manager, Tomohiro Takeno, recalled, quote, "We launched the specialized store from a sense of crisis, thinking we need to start something new, as CD sales had been in decline."
Takeno pointed out some factors contributing to the vinyl record boom in recent years: plummeting turntable prices, their selling point as tangible artworks, and the sense of doing something special, such as putting down the needle on a record.
Which is ironic because I just bought a record player that does that automatically.
Nice.
Because I'm lazy. Analyzing this vinyl boom, Takeno said, quote, "Products priced at 5,000 yen, which is about 40 USD, or higher, which previously didn't sell well, have come to be traded amid the coronavirus. The money that people don't spend on socializing and other purposes, such as drinking, as they refrain from going out, is possibly being used on buying vinyl records," which, as we've established, is awesome.
In Japan, a project to boost stay-at-home demand is already underway. The, quote, City Pop on Vinyl event kicked off amid the pandemic in 2020. Launched by major record manufacturer Toyo Kase, it featured titles and related works from Japan's city pop genre and released more than 50 works on vinyl in its second edition in August 2021.
So for those of you who have not been listening to our podcast and heard us talk about city pop a billion times, city pop is a general term for urbane and sophisticated Japanese pop music that was popular in the 1970s and 1980s. Artists such as Tatsuro Yamashita and Taeko Onuki are two major names representing the genre. Also, Maria Takeuchi, and also Maria Takeuchi.
Have you heard the song Plastic Love?
Plastic Love! So this genre of music has been rediscovered worldwide thanks to a boom in posting sampled music on video sharing websites, namely YouTube, since 2010.
That's definitely how I discovered it. The definitive moment for city pop revival came in 2016 when South Korean music producer Night Tempo did a remake of Plastic Love, originally by Japanese singer Maria Takeuchi, and posted it on a website. Thanks to this, the original song on the same website was played more than 25 million times over 2 years, likely cementing the city pop's global name recognition.
And thank God for that.
This also spurred, I think Vox or someone did an article, the best pop song ever written is a 1980s Japanese pop song. So, you know, like this got all the music buffs and music nerds, music bloggers, like freaking out at this because it's like they just like opened up Pandora's box, you know?
Yeah, it's this cool thing that you've just never heard about because, you know, city pop was a domestic thing. I mean, city pop was made for the sort of consumer culture of the 70s and 80s. And It really wasn't marketed that much overseas, even though some of the songs are in English. So the City Pop on Vinyl event also targets the digital generation whose members follow such trends. According to Toyo Kase, vinyl release plans are made in reference to the number of views on video sharing sites, YouTube, and the charts of music streaming services, Spotify,
Toyo Kase executive Makoto Hone said, quote, "Bringing in young generations is the key to sustaining the vinyl record boom. We'd like to discover music that even people in the digital generation find new and make it available on vinyl."
So, Aaron, you got me into city pop, and already my vinyl collection is going nuts.
So my favorite Japanese artist, probably of all time, is Yumi Matsutoya, or her maiden name Yumi Arai, which many know her by. Her song Hikoki Gumo was famously used in the 2013 Ghibli film titled The Wind Rises, or Kaze Tachinu. So a lot of people know her. So a lot of people know her from that. However, she has so many damn good albums.
And we keep on finding new ones. Like the other day, I picked up Reincarnation. I don't think you'd really heard that.
I hadn't.
And I mean, I've got it right here. I mean, the album art for this is awesome. It's like,
it's like a transistor or something.
It looks like a transistor or something. And I mean, half the songs on it are absolute bangers that we'd never heard.
Yeah, and Parker, you kind of named, when we were listening to it, I think we were kind of like talking, how would you describe this song? And I think you said it's like
Motown.
It's like Motown, but it's also like these Japanese power ballads or something.
Yeah, it's like if Motown and power ballads and like Wham and all that sort of 80s wham and glam, and we had a shit ton of money, so we brought in this huge cadre of like awesome musicians, like the best people in Japan, and we made this really lit album, so listen to it, yo.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the culmination of that is in these records.
And you talk about the musicians too. If you look at the back of these records, there's an alto flute player, there's a saxophone player, there's all these like musicians at their A game, like in their life, that were like on these records. So one of my favorite records by Yumi Matsutoya is Da Di Da, and specifically the song Rocket Fireworks Under the Moon. We can't play it on the podcast due to copyright issues. But if you guys can pick up this record or check this song out, I mean, for me personally, as popular as Plastic Love got, I would imagine that the same audience that is into that sound would eat this song up. The song right now, I think on the official YouTube channel only has 9,000 views. But I've told people that this song and other songs from this record, any of them have the potential to be the next Plastic Love and just completely, overtake the internet by storm, like Plastic Love did.
And it's funny because I'm looking at Da Di Da, I've got it right in front of me right now, and that track isn't even on the A side.
Yeah.
It's not even the first track on the B side. It's the second track.
Yeah.
And it's just like this hidden gem that just comes out at you with this force of awesome city pop goodness.
It was also popular in the U.S. with bands like Wham. Last Christmas, the record, the B-side was Everything She Wants. And if you talk to anybody who's into like dance music and dance music production, they know like Everything She Wants is like a really, really good song.
Yeah, and it's funny because Da Di Da, I mean, you can find it. I mean, I must have seen it at least like 20 times across, hard offs across the Kanto region. And they're usually like 500 yen to 1,000 yen. And it almost kind of pisses me off because while Maria Takeuchi, who we're about to talk about in a second, has skyrocketed popularity, this very similarly talented artist is not attracting the same premium. So if you want to get into city pop and you're not rich, Yumi Matsutoya / Yumi Arai is what you should be buying.
And I think that's the best place to start. Every record of hers is good. She doesn't have a bad record.
And one of her records is like literally like solid gold. The one No Side.
Oh yeah. I think I've heard about this. I don't own it myself.
Look at this record, man. I mean, like,
that is so
you
badass.
You can brush your teeth with the gold film on this record,
Yeah.
I mean, it really exemplifies everything that was great about the 1980s in Japan. It's just too much money, too much fun. Everybody's just, making music and spending all kinds of money on production, but it doesn't matter because we're going to sell millions of records and, everybody's rich.
This is another thing about city pop. Listening to it, it makes you nostalgic for a time, which for people our age, nostalgic for a time that we weren't even alive in. And you can hear in the music and you can feel the energy that existed here in Japan, both economically and, sociologically. There was just so much glamour and over, the 80s were all about like overconsumption, right? That's what like even like 80s pop music and stuff like uses way too much reverb on the snare. Like every snare in an 80s song is like pow, and like lasts for like 30 seconds because they were using, they just hooked up, they just got the synthesizers working to a certain extent. They got all this new outboard gear and they just cranked everything up like as high as it can go. I will say though, the Japanese equivalent, the city pop equivalent to what was going on in other parts of the world in the 80s, I think is a more refined sound.
Yeah, it's a lot more subdued, and you can really tell that, they took this so seriously. And there's a really big attention to detail. And like you said, I mean, they brought in these musicians and they were really doing their A game. And I think, you're into music production. I'm a self-proclaimed audiophile or whatever you want to call it. And you listen to songs that are produced these days, everything is using digital instruments or VSTs. And it doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound real if you know what real sounds like. And you listen to these old records from the 1980s, and you just get this raw, real sound and this culmination of these different artists coming together and making this amazing music.
Yeah. They turned the funk band, which consists of 20 different instruments, including a string section, a brass section, bass guitar, lead vocals, drums. They turned that into an orchestra and they treated it as such. They were orchestrating everything. And a lot of these musicians too, back then in the 70s and 80s in Japan, these guys were getting their music education over in the States, which is a trend that has gone down. Japanese don't go over to the States as much, like to Berkeley. And, in order to start a trend of like having like superhero level musicians, you don't need everyone going to Berkeley, right? You just need a certain group like commuting and going abroad, and they can bring back everything and then teach it here. And that culture used to really exist in the 70s and 80s.
And it spread into the 90s. I mean, I recently watched that docudrama on Ayumi Hamasaki, and obviously her genre is not city pop, but rather just J-pop.
Right.
And her training program, I mean, basically, she was just a cute girl who some producer at upcoming record label Avex was like, damn, she's hot. I'm going to turn her into a hit artist. Literally sent her to this like really rough and tumble training program led by a Japanese musician in New York City. And so like this trial by fire transformed this blue in the headlights, transformed this kind of deer in the headlights young girl into this awesome musician who ended up becoming the most successful Japanese female musician in our history.
Right. It's been really sad for me to see. I was a big fan of early 90s hip hop and pop music in the United States. And like after the 90s, it just all fizzled out and died. And this has to do with, Napster and CD sales and all that kind of stuff going away. People, sharing music online, etc. It kind of killed the industry. But,
So basically we killed the industry.
Yeah, we did. Our generation did.
Oops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But, at the same time, you have Korea, who right when that happened, that's when, Korea was already on like the pop train and was making stuff like back since like the 70s, 80s. But, the early 2000s is when they really got serious. I think they saw the opportunity. They're like, America's not making pop and alternative rock stuff that is globally charting anymore. This is a chance for us to enter the market. And it was like a couple people and three people, and that's turned into the main three major production companies in Korea. So it's really interesting to see how Japan kind of started the city pop thing in the 80s, and really that translated into a lot of pop, and I think influenced a lot of pop in the US. and then now it's gone over to South Korea. So it's almost like people are passing along like the pop hot potato or something, you know, like
the pop potato.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, of course, no segment on city pop would be complete without talking about Maria Takeuchi, who is without a doubt the most well-renowned city pop musician around the world. Her track Plastic Love, which was on the album Variety, which right before recording this podcast, I looked up on Yahoo Auctions and bought an original copy for 8,000 yen.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what a banger.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, Plastic Love, as I was talking about earlier, like using the funk band as an orchestra, Plastic Love, man, you can listen to that song over and over again and just, you keep hearing new parts, like in the brass section. You know, this is before they used a click track, right? When they would do recordings. So the drummer would go in and lay down the drums first, and everyone would align to the drummer. So there was no digital, like, you know, trickery with the click. For those who don't know, like all modern recordings are synced to a digital metronome. But, you know, in the 70s and 80s, the drummer would go in, lay his part down, and everyone would align to the drummer, even if the drummer was off a little bit. But that offset gave it more feel. And that's why modern music sounds so much different from 80s and 70s. That's one of the reasons.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah. A lot of people don't think about this. And obviously auto-tune and stuff too. I mean, like, dude, Maria Takeuchi's vocals on this track are so sweet and so good. And just like, oof, it's silky, you know? It's like silk.
Silky smooth.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Is that copyrighted by Bruno Mars now?
No, but, you know, Silk Sonic, I guarantee you, in creating their sound, they must have gone through city pop archives, specifically Plastic Love. I mean, any modern musician knows this song and should know and try to understand the implications that this song has had recently on the industry, and, you know, how important Japanese city pop is to music, and how much we can kind of like learn from it and craft new genres in music altogether.
Definitely. And I mean, it really kind of spurred the whole lo-fi hip hop boom.
Yes.
And it's amazing to listen to some of these albums. Obviously, everybody talks about Plastic Love and the album that it's on, Variety, but there's also other great Maria Takeuchi albums like Request, which also are horrendously expensive. I was lucky to get it for 6,000 yen at another hard off.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, all of her stuff is just so good.
And it's like, you know, I told you about my like tour day hard off where I went to basically every single hard off, you know, recycle shop location across Saitama Prefecture, which is where a lot of them are, looking for Maria Takeuchi albums and, you know, thinking maybe I can find a deal. Unfortunately, though, the people who decide the prices at hard off have figured out that Maria Takeuchi albums are worth lots of money, so there weren't any deals.
Yeah, and you know, I think we talked about it on the show before, but hard off is this kind of like CD/music equipment version of Book Off that are all over Japan, and they don't really. We talked about it when we talked about the guitar pedals and other musical gear, and they sell, like, you can get records, amazing records for 100 yen, $1. You know.
Hard off is like drugs for music nerds.
Oh, yeah.
They've got everything you need. It's like, they've got your fix, man. Hard off.
And retro video game stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, literally, like, if you're a nerd, hard off is the joint.
For sure.
They've even got, like, you know, figurines and all the anime stuff. And, I mean, if you go to a big one, like with the hobby off and the hard off and the house off, it's actually called Off House. I don't know why. They could just call it Off House.
Yeah. So anyone who's looking to get into city pop and really kind of better understand this whole resurgence in vinyl, I think we highly recommend to first check out, Yumi Arai or Yumi Matsutoya, and also Maria Takeuchi.
And there are also a lot of great artists that we don't have time to cover today. But
So many.
City pop is just so cool. I mean, it is a rabbit hole that you definitely should go down. But be warned, it's deep.
For sure. Hey listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.